In this video, we'll be covering the difference between long-term and short-term rentals and which investment type is best for you. Hey, what's going on? I'm Mark Terribellini, and I'm all about achieving financial independence through real estate investing and online business. So if you're new to the channel and you're looking to achieve financial freedom for yourself, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below and you will not miss a thing. So when you're looking to get into rental real estate, there's a couple different options you can go with. There's the traditional long-term rental real estate or more of a short-term rental real estate, which is kind of growing in popularity more recently. So I kind of want to go over the pros and cons of each to see which one might be best for you. So we'll start with long-term rentals, and this is the most traditional rental you can think of. It's long-term tenants. They're going to be there from 6 months, 12 months, even further out. You could do a lease for however much time you really want to do. It could be a year, 2 years, 3 years if you really want to, but that kind of lowers your chances to raise the rent. So usually most long-term tenants are there for 1 year. So the next benefits for a long-term rental is that it is more passive. You put up a fair amount of work to get a tenant in place, but once they're in place, you don't really have that much to do. It's a lot more passive. It's laid back. Once it's kind of a set it and forget it kind of situation. Yes, there will be some maintenance issues that come up occasionally, and you have to take care of that, but for the most part, it's pretty passive. You don't really have to be that involved. For example, like my rental, I've had one issue, I had a pipe break, but that was like one issue in the past over a year was like that one issue. So really not a big deal. Another good thing is it's consistent income. You know every single month how much money you're going to be getting. And you know that's if you've done the deal correctly, it's going to cover the mortgage and the insurance and the taxes and everything else, and you'll have a little bit left over. And that little bit basically goes into a bank account every month. And it's consistent. You can count on it if you have good tenants in place, at least. And yeah, so that's great, consistent income. Easy to manage. So like I was saying before, it's very easy to manage. You don't have to do that much. Once you get the tenants in place and you have good tenants, there's not much to it. It's pretty easy. It gets kind of a bad rap because people are so afraid of like, oh no, what if your tenants call you at 4 a.m. and there's a broken pipe or this or that. And it's like, yes, that can happen. And I'm sure that has happened in the past for some people, but it's not as common as people might think. So yes, you're going to run into issues, but it's not some big like crazy thing that you can't manage. Everything's manageable, so it's fine. Another good one is that the tenants cover all the utilities. So you have the tenants move in place. You don't really have to care about any bills besides paying the mortgage and the taxes and the insurance, which is pretty much automatic. You can set that up automatically and it just deducts from your bank account, so you don't have to do anything. And the tenants cover all the utilities that they're using. So it's really, really hands off. So you just have money that kind of like goes into your bank account every month from the cash flow on the property, and it just goes on. So it's really nice. One negative of long-term rentals though is that you are in a contract and there's less flexibility in that situation. So you can't just go and be like, hey, there's been a lot of updates to the property recently and I got to raise the rent. You can't do that mid-lease. You have to wait until the lease is over and then you can raise the rent. And in some states, you can only raise the rent a certain amount depending on where you live. There might be some rules and regulations around that. So you can be limited to how much you can raise the rent every time the lease expires. Hopefully you're in an area that doesn't have those limitations so you can cover your expenses, but something to be aware of. So we'll kind of move on to short-term rentals now. And the reason short-term rentals are so popular right now is because they have a greater potential for cash flow. Your mortgage could be, so just for a quick example, your mortgage could be like $2,000, but you could make like $6,000 in a month or something, depending on the area. And this is where you have to do a lot of research to find out the demands, see what the supply is like in the area, what kind of an experience your property will provide, and how much people are willing to pay for it. So it's basically like running a business to be able to set your prices to a point where you're actually profitable. So there is good income potential. And you can also do improvements to the property to raise the income. So for instance, you could put in like a hot tub or, I don't know, a small pool or anything like that. It lets you kind of raise the prices a little bit. So there's flexibility there. And speaking of flexibility, short-term rentals give you greater control and flexibility of your property. So let's say you rent it out, all the time. It's always, you're booked out 3 months in advance. Let's say you want to go out and visit the property, or you're just getting tired of managing it and you just want to take a week off, or anything. You can do whatever you want. You can go in there and block off days. If you need to make a repair or something on the property, you can block off days and then go make the repair. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. You can also, like I said, you could raise the prices, lower the prices, whatever you need to do. So there's a lot of flexibility in there, which is really nice. And what's also good as well is that with that flexibility, you can go into the property or have your manager go into the property and check on the status of the property. So make sure they're doing the routine cleanings and make sure everything's in working order. So there's a better maintenance of the property itself when you have that kind of control. So that's really good. So another good benefit is it's kind of like a vacation home. You have this other home that you're renting out on usually Airbnb or VRBO or something like that. And you can actually go out there to that property and actually write off the trip as a tax write-off if you are doing more activities that are supportive of that business, basically. So it needs to be, maintaining the property or doing things to keep it running, basically. And if you do that and it's, you're spending more time doing that than personal time, that's perfectly fine. If you're going out there just to kind of hang out and enjoy the area, you can't really write it off. But if you're going out there to do some maintenance and things like that, you can totally write off the trip. If it's a plane flight, whatever it is, you can basically write it off for your expenses. So that's kind of nice. So some of the negatives of short-term rentals is it's a lot less passive. It's very active. You have to manage the property, and you can hire someone to manage it for you, but they're going to take massive fees basically to do that. It's surprisingly a large amount. So long-term rentals, if you're going to have it managed, it's around 10% of the rent, something like that. But on a short-term rental, it's more like over 20, 30%, something like that. So depending on who you're working with. So it kind of like eats into your profits a little bit. So it's better to self-manage if you can, and a lot of today's technology allows you to do that with electronic door locks and all the messaging, automated messaging in like Airbnb and things like that. So it makes self-managing a lot easier. But you will have to spend some time doing it. You have to message the guests. If they have an issue, you need to message them back. If there's any kind of problem and you're not there, you need to have someone to go out there and solve the issue, whether it's getting more toiletries or if something breaks or whatever it is, you need to have a way to handle that problem. So it's a lot more active. And one thing you need to be aware of too is if you're purchasing a property specifically for Airbnb, you need to definitely check the local laws, because a lot of these cities will not allow you to buy a property and just put it on Airbnb. They won't let you do that. They'll come by and hit you with a fine and basically tell you to stop. So that's something to look into for sure. But there is some flexibility around that. So like in Austin, Texas, they have a certain number of rentals in a certain zip code and you can apply for it. But if you're like renting out a spare room in your house, that's fine, as long as it's all legal and everything through their paperwork and everything. But that's kind of the difference between the two. As far as which one you decide to do, I would recommend probably doing both. It's good to diversify. I think the cash flow from short-term rentals is a great thing, and you can basically get maybe a few short-term rentals and get a lot of influx of cash, save that, and then go buy a long-term rental. So you're diversified if, whatever happens. If the short-term rental market happens to tank for some reason, you have your long-term rentals to float you. If there's an issue like with COVID where people weren't paying their rent and the government was supposed to cover it, but there was issues with that, then your short-term rentals can kind of cover the long-term rentals. So it's just a good way to diversify and mitigate risk as best as you can. So that's the strategy that I'm going to be going for, is getting a few short-term rentals and using that to buy long-term, so I have that consistent passive income on one side and then the more active as I need it, basically. And then eventually, I might start fading out the more active stuff so I can have my time back to myself. So that's kind of my strategy. You can do what works best for you. So if you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.